This happened about 6 months ago. I'd just moved into a new apartment complex in a quiet suburb. The place looked nice during the day, but at night it felt different. Like the silence stretched too far and something was always just out of sight. I work late shifts at a local convenience store, usually finishing around midnight. Because the bus routes were limited at that hour, I started walking home instead. It was only about a mile, so I figured it would be faster, and I liked the fresh air. One night, around 12:30 a.m., I left work and started the walk. The streetlights flickered softly overhead, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. The air was cool and smelled faintly like rain, even though the sky was clear. The neighborhood was empty. No cars, no people, just the sound of my boots tapping on the sidewalk and a distant dog barking. As I walked down the main street, I passed a few houses with their porch lights off. Some windows were dark. Others had thin curtains drawn tightly. The whole street felt like a ghost town. I decided to take a shortcut through a small park I'd seen during the day. The park was just a narrow strip of grass between 2 rows of houses, with a few benches and some old trees. I stepped onto the path. The grass was damp with dew, and the air smelled colder here, sharper somehow. I kept my phone flashlight on low, scanning the edges of the trees as I walked. Halfway through, I noticed something. There was a figure sitting on one of the benches ahead. I thought it was strange. Who would be out here this late? As I got closer, I saw it was a man. He was hunched over, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled down low. His face was hidden in shadow. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. No answer. I stepped closer, and the man slowly looked up. His eyes were dark, almost completely black. I couldn't tell if it was just the shadow or something else. A shiver ran down my spine. I wanted to turn back, but something about him made me freeze. He didn't move, just stared. Then, suddenly, he stood up. He was tall, much taller than I expected. His movements were slow but deliberate. I took a step back. "Are you okay?" I asked, voice shaking slightly. Still no answer. I started walking faster, turning to leave the park. As I did, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy steps matching my pace. I glanced over my shoulder. The man was following me. Panic hit me. I broke into a run, my breath coming out in short gasps. The footsteps behind me quickened. I didn't look back again until I burst out of the park and onto the street. The man had stopped at the edge of the park, standing still like a statue. I kept running until I reached my apartment building. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trembling. I called my best friend, who lived nearby, and told him what happened. He said I should call the police, but I wasn't sure. There was no proof, no reason to believe he'd actually hurt me. The next night, I took the same route home but avoided the park completely. But as I walked the main street, I kept feeling like someone was watching me from the shadows. I kept glancing behind fences, into dark doorways. Then I saw it. A pair of black eyes staring from a second-floor window. The blinds were half open. I froze. The eyes blinked once, then disappeared. I didn't wait to see more. I ran the rest of the way home. For weeks after, I avoided going out at night alone. The neighborhood didn't feel safe anymore. But the worst part? Sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I still hear footsteps outside my window. Slow, heavy, like someone pacing back and forth. And when I peek through the blinds, the street is always empty, but those eyes, those black, empty eyes, I swear they're still watching. This happened 2 years ago when I was 21. I had just moved back to my small hometown after college and was staying with my parents for a while. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people leave their doors unlocked and nothing really happens. I had this habit of going on late-night walks. It helped me clear my head, and I liked the silence. No traffic, no people, just the sound of my footsteps and the occasional cricket. It was around 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday. I had just finished watching something on Netflix and decided to take a quick walk before bed. I put on a hoodie and stepped outside. It was chilly but not cold. The streetlights were glowing orange and the sidewalks were empty. I took my usual route down the block, past the small park, and back around in a loop. About 10 minutes into the walk, I passed the park. It was quiet, swings moving just a little from the wind. But then, I heard a rustle. I stopped walking. It sounded like someone shifting in the bushes near the edge of the park. At first, I figured it was a raccoon or maybe a stray cat. But the sound didn't stop. It was like breathing. Slow, deep breathing. I turned toward the bushes and stared. There was a bench nearby, and behind it, thick shrubs and trees. I took a small step closer, squinting into the dark. That's when I saw it, just for a second. A face. It was pale, and only partly visible through the leaves. But it was definitely a face. Someone was crouching in there, watching me. I froze. My heart started beating faster. I didn't move or say anything. I just stood there, staring back. Then, the face disappeared. The breathing stopped. I backed away slowly and turned around, walking fast down the sidewalk. I didn't run. I didn't want to make it obvious I was scared. But every few steps, I glanced over my shoulder. Nobody was behind me. When I got back to my street, I felt a little better. I figured maybe it was a homeless guy, or just someone messing around. Still, I locked the door behind me and went straight to my room. The next day, I went to the park during daylight, just to see if there was anything weird. There was nothing. Just bushes, trees, and the bench. No sign anyone had been there. I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want them to worry. 2 nights later, I went on another walk. I know that sounds dumb, but I figured it was a one-time thing. I stayed away from the park this time and just walked around the block. On my way back, as I turned the corner to my street, I noticed something. The street light near my house was out. It had been working earlier that day. As I got closer, I saw a figure standing under the broken light. At first, I thought it was a neighbor or maybe someone waiting for a ride. But as I walked slowly toward my house, I realized the figure wasn't moving. It was just standing there. I crossed to the other side of the street. I didn't want to go right past it. As I walked by, I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel it looking at me. When I reached my house, I looked back once. The figure was gone. That was the last walk I ever took at night. I don't know who was hiding in those bushes. I don't know who or what was standing under that broken streetlight. But sometimes, when I wake up at night and peek through my window, I swear I still see someone standing at the edge of the park, just watching. This happened during my senior year of high school, about 3 years ago. Our school was kind of far from my house, so I used to walk there and back every day. The route wasn't busy, just a long path behind some houses and through a small, wooded area. One night, I stayed late at school to finish a project. It was almost 10 p.m. when I finally left. The halls were empty and dark, and I felt a little uneasy walking to the parking lot. But I told myself it was nothing. I'd walked the path hundreds of times before. The air was cold, and the trees whispered softly in the wind. My footsteps echoed against the pavement as I started the walk home. I had my headphones in, listening to music, but I kept the volume low so I could hear anything unusual. About halfway through the wooded section, I noticed something odd. There was a shadow behind me, about 20 feet away, moving the same way I was, moving. I stopped and took out one earbud to listen carefully. No sound. The shadow kept pace, perfectly matching my steps. I looked back. There was no one. The streetlights were few and far between, but in the faint light, I couldn't see a person, just darkness stretching behind me. I started walking faster, but the shadow stayed the same distance. It didn't run, didn't slow down. I felt my skin crawl. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe my mind playing tricks because I was tired. I stopped again and turned around quickly, ready to confront whoever it was. But again, nothing. Just the empty path and the quiet night. I kept walking, trying to ignore it. But then, I heard a faint sound, a soft whisper right next to my ear. I froze. It wasn't a word, just a breathy sound, like someone trying to get my attention without making noise. I looked around quickly, but the trees were still, no one in sight. Then I felt it, something brushing against my arm, like a cold hand. But when I looked down, nothing was there. Started running. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure anyone nearby could hear it. When I finally got out of the woods and onto the street with houses again, the shadow disappeared. I never told anyone because I wasn't sure what I saw, and maybe I didn't want to believe it was real. Even now, when I have to walk that way at night, I check over my shoulder every few steps. Because sometimes, when the street is quiet and the wind is low, I swear I feel that cold brush on my arm again, and the shadow still follows me. I never thought a short walk from the hotel lobby to my room could feel so terrifying. But that night, it did. It happened when I was traveling alone for work. I stayed at a small, older hotel in a city I didn't know well. Nothing fancy, but it was close to the office and pretty affordable. The kind of place where the paint is peeling a little, the carpets are worn, and the elevators creak. I had arrived late, around 10 p.m., and after a long day of meetings, I just wanted to get to my room and relax. I took the elevator up to the 5th floor, the floor where my room was. The elevator was small, just enough space for 4 people. As the doors closed behind me, I noticed another man inside. He was tall and wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up so I couldn't see his face clearly. He was standing near the back, silent and still. The elevator started moving slowly upward. I didn't say anything. I just kept my eyes on the floor numbers, lighting up above the doors. The man didn't say anything either. Not a word. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor. The doors opened, but no one got in or out. The man shifted his weight a little, but still said nothing. I felt a knot in my stomach. Something about him was off, too quiet, too still. When the elevator stopped at the 4th floor, the doors opened again. This time, a woman got in. She smiled politely at me and pressed a button for the 6th floor. Then she looked at the man and said, "Hello?" He didn't respond. The elevator started moving again, slowly rising. I tried to focus on the music, playing softly from my headphones, but I could feel the man's eyes on me. I pulled my hoodie tighter around my neck and looked at the elevator buttons. Suddenly, the man took a step toward me. I froze. He reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out a small knife. I didn't scream or run. I just stood there, heart racing. The woman looked shocked, but stayed calm, pressing the emergency button on the panel. The elevator jolted and stopped between floors. The lights flickered, and the emergency speaker crackled. I felt the man's cold eyes on me, but he didn't say a word. He just held the knife, pointing it at the floor. The woman whispered, "Please don't hurt us." I nodded, trying to stay as still as possible. Then, out of nowhere, the man dropped the knife. He turned and pressed a button for the basement floor. The doors opened, and the elevator was filled with thick, musty air. The basement smelled like old concrete and damp pipes. I thought about jumping out, but I was frozen. The man stepped out into the dark hallway and motioned for us to follow. The woman didn't hesitate. She stepped out, pulling me with her gently but firmly. We walked down the long, dim corridor. Our footsteps echoed off the walls. I could hear faint, dripping water somewhere in the distance. The man stopped near a rusty door and turned to face us. He finally spoke. His voice was low and calm. "You're not supposed to be here." The woman tried to speak, but the man raised his hand to stop her. I noticed something on the man's wrist, a faded tattoo. It looked like a number. I didn't know what to say or do. Suddenly, the door behind him creaked open, and a cold breeze swept through the hallway. I shivered. The man motioned us to go through the door. The basement was a maze of old rooms and pipes. The light was dim and flickered every few seconds. I could hear faint breathing, almost like someone was hiding nearby. The woman whispered, "Let's just find a way out." We walked quietly, trying to find a staircase or an exit. Suddenly, I felt something brush against my arm, cold, like a hand. I jumped and looked down. Nothing was there. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. Then, I heard footsteps behind us. Slow, heavy steps. I looked back, but the corridor was empty. We kept moving forward, but the footsteps followed. Faster, closer. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. The woman grabbed my hand and whispered, "Run!" We sprinted down the hallway. The footsteps were right behind us now. We reached a stairwell and ran up the stairs 2 at a time. When we burst out of the basement door, the elevator was there, its doors open like a mouth waiting to swallow us again. We ran to the lobby and out the front door into the cool night air. I didn't look back until I was across the street. There was no sign of the man, no one following us. The woman turned to me and said, "I think he's been living down there, waiting. I never stayed in that hotel again." Sometimes when I'm walking alone late at night, I think about that basement, the cold air, the dark hallways, and the silent man with the knife. And I wonder if he's still there, waiting for the next elevator ride. This happened last year when I was visiting my hometown for a few days. I hadn't lived there for a long time, but I still knew the streets pretty well. One night, I stayed late at a friend's house and decided to walk back to my parents' place. It was about a mile away, and usually the walk was peaceful, quiet, but not empty. Even late at night, you'd hear a car pass by, or someone walking their dog, or the faint sound of a TV from an open window. But that night was different. Left around midnight, the sky clear and stars faintly visible. The air smelled like freshly cut grass mixed with a faint, smoky scent, probably from someone's fireplace. The streetlights flickered softly, lighting the road unevenly. I started walking down the main road, boots clicking on the pavement. I passed houses I'd known all my life, but the windows were all dark and shut tight. No lights on, no signs of life. The usual sounds, the distant hum of a lawnmower, the occasional car engine, dogs barking, were all gone. It was dead silent. I shrugged it off. Maybe everyone had already gone to bed early because of the cold. As I walked, I noticed something strange. Every house had their porch lights off. Normally, at least a few houses kept them on. The silence grew heavier with every step. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. The battery was low, around 15%, so I turned off my flashlight to save power. I kept my pace steady, telling myself I was just overthinking. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow shifted quickly across the street, disappearing behind a parked car. I stopped and looked over. The street was empty. No cars driving by, no people. My heart beat a little faster. I kept walking. The street began to curve, leading toward a stretch of road lined with tall trees on either side, something I always found peaceful during the day. But tonight, the trees looked like looming black shapes against the sky. I heard something, soft, almost like breathing. I stopped again, holding my breath. There was nothing. I shook my head and kept going. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, steady steps matching my pace. I quickened my pace. The footsteps matched mine faster. I broke into a run, my lungs burning. The footsteps sped up too. I risked a glance back. No one. The street was empty, but the footsteps kept coming. I stumbled and fell onto the pavement. My hands scraped and stung. I scrambled up, ignoring the pain, and ran faster. The footsteps were gone. I stopped, panting, hands on my knees. A cold breeze swept past me, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like rust or old blood. I looked around. Still nothing. I checked my phone again. It was dead. I was alone. The street stretched ahead, dark and empty. I decided to keep running toward my parents' house. As I got closer, I saw the porch light on at the house next door. The relief was sudden and sharp. But then, I noticed something on the porch steps. A pair of old, muddy boots. They looked out of place, like someone had just kicked them off and left them there. I didn't recognize them. I felt a cold chill run through me. I looked up at the window. The curtains twitched. A face appeared. A man's face, pale and staring straight at me. His eyes were dark, empty, and fixed on me. I froze. He didn't blink. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then, the porch light flickered and went out. The face disappeared. I blinked, trying to clear my eyes. When the light came back on a second later, the porch was empty. No boots, no man. Just the faint smell of smoke and something like wet soil. I ran the rest of the way to my parents' door. I didn't tell them what happened. I don't know if they would believe me. Sometimes I think about that quiet road and those footsteps that weren't there, and the face watching me from the window. Because even now I can still feel it watching, waiting,